Welcome to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we discuss the history, facts, people, places, events, lots more surrounding Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinsideout.com. Rhonda and I arrived at about 3 p.m. on Christmas Day, December the 25th, 2020. It was a Friday, and we checked in to our Airbnb reservation inside Hot Springs Village. We checked out on Saturday, January the 2nd, 2021, which, by the way, was our 43rd anniversary, January the 2nd. And it was during that visit that the idea for this podcast was probably first born. I'm not sure what trip that was, what number it was into the village, but every trip I had more questions. Every trip I had higher curiosity. Every trip I was learning things about the place that I had not learned before, and that was prompting at least a handful of other things that I didn't know that I wanted to know. We had a trip scheduled to come back, and we did come back the week of April the 1st. April the 3rd. I think April the 3rd, 2021 was a Monday, and it was dead solid. It was dead solid sure by that point that I wanted to start a podcast about Hot Springs Village, primarily for two reasons. To learn more about the place, but I also wanted to shout out the ninnies. There was a whole lot of social media drama at the time. There still is, and there always will be, but there was a considerable amount of rock throwing, a lot of negativity. And as a visitor who was coming and spending a week at a time, it just made no sense to me. I didn't understand any of it. Quite frankly, I still don't, but it's just not how I'm wired. The general manager at the time, between those two visits, he pulled a pin out of his grenade, threw that on the floor as he walked out after a 6-month stint. The first thing I remember thinking is, well, good riddance. Good riddance. This was probably not the best hire in the world anyway. I was puzzled. I was baffled by the whole thing. And I remember thinking, this could be very off-putting if people haven't spent any time in this place, if people don't really understand what this place is all about. I mean, this could really be a repellent to anybody who has interest in Hot Springs Village. It didn't for me, because by now I had a few years of coming with some regularity to visit the place. And while I didn't understand being a resident, I didn't understand all of the issues that could be present for living full-time in Hot Springs Village, I had some sense of it. Because I've lived in communities all my life, and so have you. And I've lived in communities that I liked a lot. I've lived in communities that I didn't like so much. And even the ones that I liked a lot, and the ones that I've even loved, There's issues. There's issues. I'm supposing that your family is perfect, and I'm supposing that everybody gets along famously, that there's never been any conflict, there's never been any issues, there's never been any drama. Oh, wait a minute, what? Yeah. But we expect our community to be better than our families. Well, guess what? They're not. So there's that. So by the time you get to the spring of 2021, I'm really committed. I've registered the name. I have begun a little bit of work on what I think I want the website to look like. I've outlined what my thoughts are about the podcast, this thing that I think I want to name it Hot Springs Village Inside Out. But I need an insider. I need somebody that really knows the place. And I've been watching. I've been lurking. I've been trolling. And I've seen this gentleman do this video web show, Village Venues. It turns out, just as coincidence would have it, that the very first place that we had come to visit, the very first Airbnb host, was Dennis R. Simpson. I didn't know Dennis. And I reached out to Dennis and didn't get any response. It was by email. And I was just looking to have a really short Zoom call to explain to him, here's who I am, here's what I'm wanting to do. I'm not looking to start a business. I'm not looking to monetize. I'm mainly looking to promote Hot Springs Village because I love it. And along the way, I want to learn as much as I can about it. I've got a lot of questions and a lot of curiosity about the place. And I don't figure my curiosity is ever going to get satisfied because, well, my curiosity hardly ever gets satisfied. Certainly about a place that I care that much about. And by now, we've spent a considerable amount of money coming over a week at a time and largely doing this in the fall months. During the pandemic, which for an introvert like me, I hate the health concerns and the health challenges of the pandemic. But as far as the isolation, I rather enjoyed it. But I'm an introvert like that. I think we came over, I don't know, man. We came over 4 to 6 times during the pandemic. So it was great. That part of it was great. At some point, Dennis and I finally connect. It seemed like it took weeks. It took weeks to wrangle him down. But once we did, we jumped on a Zoom call, and I quickly dove into, here's who I am, here's what I'm wanting to do, and he very quickly said yes. I don't know that he even had a clue what he was saying yes to. I'm rather certain he didn't know what he was saying yes to, but he did say yes, and I'm thankful that he did. And we talked back and forth and got the website built. I got the very first episode recorded and released that episode. And we got on all of the major podcast platforms with that one episode. For those of you that don't know the ins and outs of podcasting, and you don't have to, but you're not going to get in Spotify and you're not going to get on these platforms unless you have at least one episode. It's not like the bar is really high, but you do have to have an episode, an audio episode. And so we had our audio episode and we started recording. I would love to tell you that over the last year, because today's the birthday, June the 1st, 2022. So happy birthday to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, the podcast. I'd love to tell you that over the course of the last year, we've really grown, we've really improved. And I don't I personally don't much think we have, but we're going to work on it. We're going to work on it. We're still crawling, hoping to get to our feet, wobbly kneed and all. The big thank you, the big celebration, I think belongs to Hot Springs Village and belongs to you. Those of you that give us your time and attention, those of you that click play, whether it's on a video on YouTube or our website, whether it's clicking that audio link on our website, or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. For those of you that take the time to comment, for those of you that take the time to email us, thank you. Thank you, because without you, we'd still be doing this, because I've still got questions. I've still got a lot of curiosity. Over the last 6 months, my curiosity has kind of taken a back seat, and I'm going to shove it more to the forefront here, because there's still an awful lot about the place to be talked about and to be discussed. Along the way, there have been a number of surprises, most all of them pleasant. Chief among that are the number of people who have begun to listen and watch the podcast who've never been to Hot Springs Village. Some of you have now, but when you first started listening, you hadn't. And that was a total shock. I did not see that coming a million miles away. But we began to hear from people all over the country who somehow, some way, they found out about Hot Springs Village and bummed around and found our podcast. And we would begin to hear from these people. And I thought, I just never imagined somebody in the Carolinas or somebody in the Pacific Northwest or somebody in the Northeast or somebody in Florida or somebody in California who's never been to Hot Springs Village. In fact, some of these people confess they had never been to Arkansas. Some of them still haven't been. There's a huge difference, and I'm going to say this. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to say this. So I live in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. This is home. That's subject to change, but for now, this is home, because this is where all the grandkids are. This is where the family's at. Now, in Texas, we've had a rash of out-of-state folks move into Texas. And I'm not political, but the politics of Texas, it's changing. The interesting thing to me about people that this is from my distance, this is an observation. I'm not saying this is empirical truth, but it seems to me that a large chunk, perhaps the majority of people who move from out of state to Arkansas, though, are attracted to the things that make Arkansas, Arkansas. That's not necessarily the case here in Texas. I'll just leave it at that. There have been just a ton of pleasant surprises along the way. Most notably, you, the audience. I think secondarily is the great people that we've had on the show. It's a long list, and I'm not going to begin to name names of all the people who've been on the program over the last year. I do have to give some thanks to a few people, most notably to John Paul. John Paul is the interim GM. John Paul gave us access. He gave the podcast access to various directors and people in leadership at the POA. I found that personally hugely beneficial, because I had a lot of questions, and to find out some of this stuff, and then to meet these people online and some later in person. And I was not shocked at all with this whole spirit of service and the fanaticism of customer service, because the day job for me is largely coaching people in city government. And I've long been attracted, since I first began to serve that crowd, I've long been attracted to just their wiring and the way they go about their business. And so that was all great. And a huge shout out and a huge thank you to John Paul. The business community, especially the restaurant folks in and around Hot Springs Village, they leap to my mind. I would start naming names, but I'm certain I would leave somebody out, so I'll forego that. But you know who you are. We reached out to these restaurant owners. Some reached out to us. Some that we've not yet had on the show. We've been working to have them on the show. It's not through any fault of theirs. It's just scheduling and trying to make it happen. And with all of the supply chain issues and with all of the problems that restaurant owners have, not just inside the village, but those directly outside the village, a huge thank you to you guys and gals. I will give a shout out to Jim and Andrea Sparks, retired owners of the home plate, because they're kind of special, and well, they're out of the game now. Bully for them. We're all happy. We're all happy for them. Business owners in and around Hot Springs Village are also special. And I think the pandemic's had something to do with that. I think my roots in small business have got a lot to do with that. These are people that are close to my heart. This is where my roots are. I mean, you're looking at a guy that started out as a 15, 16-year-old hi-fi salesman working for a local stereo shop, and it's where my roots are. So I have a special affinity for the small business owner. Small, not defined so much by scope and scale of the business, but small in the sense that the owner is really close to the work. And there are a lot of great business owners inside the village and directly outside the village that come to work every day, that are grinding away, trying to serve the community, trying to serve their families, trying to serve their employees and their businesses. And a huge thank you to them. Along the way, very quickly, people were interested in advertising or sponsoring the show. Not wanting to be mercenary and wanting to be very, very careful about it, I resisted for a very, very long time. We just released on Monday kind of a real tongue-in-cheek show, in part, because we've got a media partner that we had very early on with KVRE. So we owe a huge shout out to Alice and Tom, the rest of the crew, and Tracy, and all of them over there at KVRE. And then Miss Clara Nicolosi and the entire crew over at Remax of Hot Springs Village. A huge shout out to Clara. I mean, here's somebody that these two entities, and there are others, these two entities have such a community mind and are so involved and so integral in the community and the things that go on. For me, a guy who comes and visits and who is a property owner inside the village and hopes to spend more time there sooner than later, these relationships really matter. And the relationships with other people matter. It's not just a matter of sponsoring the podcast. It's not a matter of it being formalized in some business transaction. The relationships really matter. And Dennis and I both care about them deeply. So I won't belabor it. Lord willing, at some point today, Dennis and I plan to go live. I don't know what that's going to look like or what we're going to do, but we'll do it to kind of celebrate today being June 1st, 2022, our very first birthday. So as awkward as it sounds, happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to Hot Springs Village, Inside Out. I'm glad we survived a year, and Lord willing, we'll keep on improving this thing. We'll get up on our feet and we'll start walking a little bit, and maybe by this time next year, well, we'll be very accomplished at walking. I don't know that we'll be running quite yet, but we're working on it. Thanks to you. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can do that by visiting our website, hsvinsideout.com, and tell a friend.